Hey everybody, welcome to this part of our iOS development tutorial. As a reminder, we are going to be building an application that is a master detail application with a table view in it. We're going to load data into the table view from an external database that is sitting on a public web server. We'll have a web service of sorts that's going to return data in the JSON format, which is what we'll use to actually load the data up. All right, with that said and done, what we are going to be doing here is essentially first setting up our project itself. And before we do that, let me show you real quick the version of xCode that I'm running. So I'm on version 5.0.2. So if you're on this version or something higher than 5, you should be good to go. All right, with that said, let us pick our application, our project type. We are going to, we have all of these options of course, but I'm going to select empty application, hit next. I'm going to call this project JSON Storyboard YT for YouTube, and I'm going to set the device type to iPhone, hit next, and just save this on my desktop. Okay, so xCode is going to take a couple seconds to index everything here, but I wanted to quickly bring everybody's attention to the file navigator. Notice that we do not have any kind of a storyboard file, and that's because we selected the empty application project. Now what we can do of course is add the storyboard file, so that's real easy to do. We just click on our project and say new file, and then we select storyboard from within this user interface section. So you're probably on this by default. Just switch over to user interface, select storyboard, hit next. It's going to ask you what device family you want. iPhone is good enough in this case. And then we're just going to save this. I'm going to rename this and call it main storyboard.storyboard. We'll hit create, and there we go. We've got that. All right, so here's our storyboard file. Great. Next step, we want to jump to our project itself, and we want to set our main interface here. So this is selected the project name, went over to the general tab. Under deployment info, the main interface, we want to set this to storyboard. So that's what essentially allows us to use storyboards within this project. Now, just as a quick segue here, if you jump into your app delegate file, you'll notice that it has some code in there. Now, this code is essentially added when you pick the empty project. Interestingly enough, it is code that we don't need. So you can just actually select all of this, return yes. And why can we do this? It's because we're using storyboards. Now, if we had picked one of the other project types and you came over to this app delegates implementation file and looked at the application did finish launching with options method, you would notice that it just returns yes. So that's what we need. So we'll delete all of the other information out. Okay. Now let's jump over to our main storyboard.storyboard file. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find a navigation controller. So again, if you don't have your objects library open, you want to go over here to your the attributes inspector, pull that up, find the navigation controller, drag this, and here we go. We now have a navigation controller with a table view embedded within it. So this is our starting point. Remember, we are building an application that has a table view, and then we want to load a detail view onto that. Okay, so that's our first step. If we build and run at this point, you'll see that we get our standard little table view. All right, very good. Or empty looking table view. Okay, with that said and done, what we need to do next is create a brand new class that is going to serve as sort of the class for this particular table view controller. So the way we would do that is, again, we'll come over here, we're going to say new file. This time we're going to jump back to Cocoa Touch, click on Objective-C class, hit next, and it's going to say, okay, well, what do you want to create a subclass of? Well, UI view controller would work, but something that might be a little bit better for us is let's create a subclass of UI table view controller, and we'll call this one cities view controller. We do not want to set the targeted for iPad or with XIB for user interface options. Just hit next. It's going to create our file, no problem. Bingo, we've got that. So one of the reasons I picked table view controller is the fact that our controller itself is a table view controller. So we see that here. And 2, by selecting that, I actually can avoid having to add a lot of the code. So you can see here, by selecting that particular class to subclass from, it's already added in some of the methods I'm going to need. So makes our life super easy, which is awesome. Okay, so let's jump over here. We are good. Now we'll jump back over to the storyboard file. And what we want to do is select our table view controller, so the entire thing. So what we want to do is come down here, select the entire table view controller, jump over here to our particular identity inspector, and you'll see the custom class option is currently set to UI table view controller. We want to set that to cities view controller, which is the new class we created. And remember, that is a subclass of UI table view controller, which is why it shows up here. So this is awesome. We get that there. Next, we are within this particular table view controller. Notice that because we're using storyboards, we get this new prototype cells option. And if you've not worked with prototype cells, don't worry about it at this point. I'm going to do a different video that actually talks about prototype cells. In short, these are going to allow you to do a tremendous amount of customization for your table view cells. So if you want to do different labels, want to do images and things like that, this makes it incredibly easy. So we'll look at that in a different video. For now, what I want you to do is just select the prototype cell, and we want to jump over to the identity inspector, and we need to give this a reuse identifier. So I'm just going to select cell for now, keep that easy, and there we go. All right, so you'll notice we've got a couple warnings, and those are coming from the code that xCode automatically inserted. So you see here it says warning, potentially incomplete method implementation. So I can of course just delete this, and that won't be a problem, and that warning goes away. But really what it's telling me is, hey, you haven't set any of this here. We need to set the number of sections. So since we're gonna only have one section, I'm just gonna go ahead and return 1 here. Same thing here. It's saying warning, incomplete method implementation. Again, I can delete that. I want to return the number of rows in section. Just for the sake of this video, let's just go ahead and return 5. We're actually going to change that in the future. And the rest of the stuff looks okay. So we can just come back here and run this particular application. Okay, so we get that here. So it looks good. Maybe what we could try and do is, it's in our view.load method. We can delete all of this stuff, and that way we are good to go there. Okay, one thing that's going to be pretty major is, since we're loading our data from a external database, we're going to want to create a custom class that we can then use, and sort of every time we get a piece of data, we'll use that custom class to create an object of that class, and then we'll load that up into an array on our end. Okay, so next thing let's do is let's create the custom class. So I'm just going to hit new file, and this time I'm going to say it is a subclass of NS object, and I'm going to call my class city, because we are going to be creating city objects. Okay, with that done, just hit create, and we get our header and implementation file. All right, so within this particular file, one of the things we're going to need to do is set up a couple different properties, and these are all going to be NS strings. So let's just set those up. So, okay, NS string, and I'm going to start calling these properties, let's say city name, and what we can do here is essentially do a quick command C and replicate these a couple times. Okay, so we're going to get a number of different errors, but let's see what we essentially need to create. So here's my GitHub page with the script that allows you to create the tables themselves. So within this, we've already created this table, we've inserted some data into here, but notice some of the column types that I've got that I'm going to want to save data for. So you've of course got an ID value, which is our primary key, city name, city state, city population, country. And so we've essentially got 5 sort of attributes, including the ID, that we want to store within our object. So we've got city name. So let's go ahead and do city ID, city state, city country, and city population. All right, with that done, let's go ahead and synthesize it. Now, I know that with the new format for Objective-C and some of the more recent developer conferences, Apple has essentially almost stopped synthesizing some of these things because you can actually refer to the different properties without actually synthesizing them here. But since I'm used to doing it that way, I will continue to do it. I also think it makes it a little bit clearer when you're working with it in your code. So I'm going to go ahead and do just that. So we had city ID, city name, we had city state, city country, and city population. All right. Next, we need to implement some kind of a method that is essentially going to allow us to initialize this particular object. So we're just going to call it, this is a method that we're going to make up. So we're just going to say init with, and we're going to pass in all of the things that we've got at this point. So we're going to say init with city name, and we will pass it a parameter of cname. We're going to say and city state. This time we're going to give it a parameter of cstate, and city country also takes it in a string. Say it's going to take it in a string that's called C country, and city population, just again in a string, and that parameter is going to be called C population, and city ID. You get the idea. All right. Okay. Now, if you're wondering where I got this particular method name from, well, I just made it up. You can call the method whatever you like, as long as you implement within it some of the code you're going to see here in a second. So I just chose to call it this name, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, jump over to my implementation file, and here's what we do to actually do the initialization. All right, so we're going to say self is assigned the value of super in it. We're then going to say if self, and then within our if block, we're essentially going to set all of our values. So one of the first parameters we're getting is city name, so we're going to say city name is assigned the value of cname, which is our parameter. Then we're going to say city state is assigned the value of cstate. City country is assigned the value of C country, so on and so forth. All right, so city population, I believe, is next. Let's set it to C population, and city ID is assigned the value of city ID. There we go. Getting an error there. Okay, with that done, we just return self. That's it. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we've got our city class set up. No problem there. And judging by the time on this video, we're now 14 minutes in. I'm going to stop the video here. And in the next part of this tutorial, we're going to take a look at how we can actually set up all our different methods to load up the data within our table view. All right, so see you in the next video.